Hello, everyone, and welcome to APS Webinars. The title of today's webinar is From Academia to Entrepreneurship. I'm Crystal Bailey, and I'll be your host for today's broadcast. Thank you all so much for joining us. APS Webinars are brought to you as a service of the American Physical Society, connecting you with the expertise of individuals who can offer insight into physics careers, educational programs, and professional development for students, working physicists, and educators. Today's presentation features Thirumalai or Venkatesan. Venki will be providing information about the process of taking academic research into the entrepreneurial realm. After Venki finishes the presentation, the remainder of the program will belong to you for our question and answer session. Because of the number of people attending this webinar, we are only accepting text questions. So if you would like to ask a question, please type it into the questions panel located on the right side of your screen. You may submit questions through this panel at any time during the webinar, and we will answer all of your questions during a Q&A period at the end. We will do our best to cover all of the questions you submit, but also apologize in advance if we're unable to cover everything. Finally, as you can see on the screen, a link to the recording of today's presentation will be emailed to you after the event, and will also be made available online. Please allow 24 hours for video upload. Also, we encourage you to complete the survey upon exiting so that APS Webinars can improve its ability to provide you with these valuable services. And so with that, let's go ahead and get started. Venkatesan is the recipient of the 2020 APS Distinguished Lectureship Award for the Applications of Physics for invention and commercialization of the pulse laser deposition process, and for sustained leadership in academic entrepreneurship. He is also director of the Nano Institute at the National University of Singapore, where he is a professor of ECE, physics, MSE, and NGS. He wore various hats at Bell Labs and Bell Corps before becoming a professor at University of Maryland. As the inventor of the pulsed laser deposition process, he has over 760 papers and 30 patents, and is globally among the top 100 in terms of his citations at nearly 44,000. He has graduated about 50 PhDs, 35 postdocs, and over 35 undergraduates. He is also the founder and chairman of Neocera, a company specializing in the area of pulsed laser deposition and magnetic field imaging systems. Close to 10 of the researchers he has mentored have become entrepreneurs, starting over 17 different commercial enterprises. Venki is also a fellow of the APS, winner of the Bell Corps Award of Excellence, guest professor at Tsinghua University in China, winner of the APS George E. Paikey Prize, President's Gold Medal of the Institute of Physics Singapore, academician of the Asia Pacific Academy of Materials, fellow of the World Innovation Forum, was a member of the Physics Policy Committee in Washington, D.C., the Board of Visitors at University of Maryland, and chair of the Forum on Industrial and Applied Physics at APS. He was awarded the Outstanding Alumnus Award from two Indian Institutes of Technologies, Kanpur and Kharagpur in India. He's launched two companies in Singapore, Breathonics and Cellivate. He got his bachelor's with honors in physics from IIT Kharagpur, his MS in physics from IIT Kanpur, and his PhD in physics from CUNY and Bell Labs at Murray Hill. So Venki, take it away.
Okay. Thank you, Crystal. Okay. So my strategy here was to, let's see, there was a first thing I wanted to do was to run a poll here, and here's a question. And I would like you to answer this, and let's take a small poll so I know the audience that I'm talking to, okay?
Yeah, please check which one applies. We're gonna give you about 15 seconds, 20 seconds. Okay, lots of responses coming in. This is great. Okay, so we are closing the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And here are the results. So about 20% have started their own company, 13% had a mentor who was an entrepreneur, and 73% none of the above.
Okay. Well, the reason I put up this poll is because I want to let you know that I belong to the none of the above category when I started my career as a researcher. And so I thought it would be useful to give you an idea of how my mindset changed over time. And essentially, I'll give you my adventure when I was at Bell Labs. And I'm talking about the year 1973, 70s timeframe. This is really, there was a time when Bell Labs was really at its peak and its glory. And so this is Murray Hill on the left here. And these were my various bosses. This is Arno Penzias and Bob Wilson. And these are the guys who discovered the black body radiation using their special antenna here, radio antenna here. And I moved from Crawford Hill to Bell Labs at Murray Hill. And my boss was Walter Brown there. And he was the guy who headed up the Telstar program in the 50s, which launched the satellite program in the United States. And later, Bob Dines became my boss, and then my career actually my career started at Bell Lab doing my PhD work with these two scientists, Hyatt Gibbs and Sam McCall. We worked on building an equivalent of an optical transistor, which we did, which is the optical output power versus optical input power, shows this very beautiful hysteretic curve. And this work was done in a variety of systems there. And I recently did this work in Singapore. The data that I'm showing here is actually done in graphene. And this work is a more recent work. Then after Bell Labs, I moved over to Bellcore, which is a kind of like a byproduct of the splitting of the AT&T as a company into the AT&T and the operating companies. And so Bellcore became the effective Bell Labs for the operating companies, and Bell Labs remained with AT&T. Okay, so this is an extraordinary time being with really extraordinary people, but a lot of our focus here was on coming up with the next great scientific product, which is going to get you this big prize. So everyone at Bell Lab thinks that way, and you see, that's really what our focus was. And so what happened is when we went from Bell Labs to Bellcore, there was an interim period where I essentially became manager, and I hired a number of people, and we ordered millions of dollars worth of equipment. And so during the waiting time, I decided to do my sabbatical at Caltech. So this is where my entire paradigm about life changed dramatically. So the sabbatical with Amnon Yariv at Caltech. Yariv is an incredibly well-known person in the area of quantum electronics, and he's not only academically highly accomplished, but he also was a phenomenal entrepreneur, and in his group, a large number of companies were started. So when I went and spent a year in this group, it completely changed my attitude to life. I said, oh my gosh, just doing research for the sake of research is not the only thing. It'd be really amazing to be able to company take an idea. And so this truly had a profound influence on my thinking. So when I got back to Bellcore after this sabbatical, a new problem arose, and that is we just didn't have a space to put all our people. So my entire group had nowhere to go. So I had all the newcomers and all kinds of equipment landing up, millions of dollars of worth of equipment, and no place to put them. It was a really strange problem. So what I did is I went straight over to Rutgers University. This is the Serin Physics Lab in Rutgers. And I found out that Alex Pond, who was the executive vice president of Rutgers, was the guy who makes all the calls and decisions. So I negotiated a deal with him. I said, look, I want to bring my entire department here to Rutgers. If you give us space here, and by the time I leave, I will establish a laboratory in Rutgers in the area of surface modification research, which was the topic of my field, basically. And Alec Pond cracked his whip, and within 3 months, they gutted out the basement of this building, created an entire laboratory for my department, and we all moved in here within a record time. We moved into here, and essentially the Belcore department that I formed here at Rutgers was effectively operating like an independent company. We made up our own rules about, everything from males, janitors, and what have you. All of the rules were made by thing. And this really was my first exposure to running something akin to a company. And I really really got wetted on this process basically by this. Okay. So there's another amazing thing happened. So once we dust settled, we got back into Belcore, things was happening. This is the year 1986, and it was a year of supers. There was a super collapse on Wall Street in the October. Then there was a supernova that was visible to the eye that you could see, and then there was a high TC superconductivity that came toward the end of the year. And the superconductivity was observed in materials like yttrium, barium, copper oxide, and these are multi-component oxides, and everyone is struggling really hard to make these films of multi-component oxides. And my group was essentially in what I would call the analytical area. So we were actually more involved in analyzing the results of all the other people's activities. But I wanted to start my own program in making high TC films. So I came up with the idea that why not if I take a pulsed laser and I shine it on top of one of these stoichiometric targets of the superconductors, will I be able to make a stoichiometric film? And this is an amazing experiment where this is the first experimental result that I have here. This is what's called a Rutherford backscattering spectrum of a film of yttrium, barium, copper oxide made by using a pulse laser. And you can see the compositions, which is the dashed lines of the simulation for yttrium-1, barium-2, copper-3. And you can see that we've got the composition right, bang on. And I suddenly realized that we had here a process that has tremendous value. And this is the birth of the technology called pulse laser deposition. And so I went back to Belcore and I said, look, this technology is going to revolutionize the field of multi-component oxides. We should start a program in Belcore in the area of oxide electronics and all the other technologies that depend on oxides. And for a variety of reasons, Belcore would not take up this challenge. So at that point, I decided that I should form my own company to do this technology, to transfer this technology. And I formed a company called the New Ceramics, or NeoCera, as I called it. So NeoCera was born. The aim of the company was to essentially commercialize technologies based on oxide, since we now had a way to make these oxide films extremely fast and effectively. Okay, and so this is the formation of NeoCera, May 1989. So what I did is I incorporated the company. Remember, I was still an employee of Belcore, okay? And I promptly applied for 2 SBIR grants, and we won them from Department of Energy and NASA. And because this technique was so new and so effective, my work became, extremely well known across, the world, and it's very easy for us to get all these grants and everything. So I started off building this company completely based on the different government grants. And since I created a new market for XML lasers, the Dirk Basting was the founder of this company called Lambda Physique. He loaned me an XML laser for my company, and with my first employee and my my former boss from Belcore, Roger Edward, we started the company with him as the president. So this is how the company got started. And of course, Belcore, being a member of Belcore, being an employee of Belcore, you couldn't really have a company of your own. So in principle, I was really violating the norms of the company. But I told my management that I was starting the company, and they literally did not know what to do with me. So the chairman of the company called me up and he said, okay, Venki, we're going to start an entrepreneurship program so that you could stay within the company as an employee and still keep your private company. And so work out a contract with our lawyers. And that's when you realize that the companies are run by lawyers and not by the CEO or the chairman of the company. So for the lawyers and the Belcourt decided that they did not want to encourage employees from having a company because it'll increase their workload. So they just started giving me a very difficult time. It took me about 18 months negotiating back and forth, back and forth. I was represented by a lawyer from Manhattan, and that guy was charging me $450 an hour. So you can see very quickly how my personal bills are going up tremendously. So I'd already logged in about $50,000 worth of expenses without making any progress towards convergence on my contract with Belcourt. So I decided that I'm going to quit Belcourt at some point. I went to University of Maryland as a professor, full-time professor, and they were delighted to note that I was bringing a company with me. And so a whole new life started in Maryland, basically. So I moved to Maryland, and the company started growing. Neocera started growing, and essentially these are the various product lines. So I realized something. I realized that the university is generating so many outstanding, great technical ideas. Maybe I can use Neocera as a way to translate a lot of these technologies. So actually, we started selling pulse laser deposition system. We had several innovations, and there's combinatorial systems, pulse electron deposition system, and at this moment we have sold over 250 systems around the world in about 36 countries. And then I started developing other technologies that were developed by my colleagues at Maryland. One was the magnetic field imaging system we call MAGMA. And this was really originally an invention of Fred Wellstead from University of Maryland. And this is essentially became our second main product. Then there was another product developed by Professor Steve Anlaga called scanning microwave microscopes for imaging locate dielectrics. And this was a product called Neometrics. And this product was eventually sold off to a Pennsylvania company. And we had a few other products, but they were all eventually sold off. Okay, so this is a typical PLD MBE system today that we sell, and with this system we can grow complex oxides at atomic layer dimension, and essentially systems like these sell for something like $500,000 plus minus. Okay. One of the amazing things that we had to do in this field was, since I could not protect a lot of my IP in this business because of the laxity of the lawyers at Belcourt, essentially what happened is that we had to constantly keep developing new technology to keep ahead. So for example, the most recent technology developed at Neocera is its low-angle X-ray scattering. In this technique, what we do is there is a read electron beam which comes and then bounces off of the surface of the film, which we then use it for thickness monitoring. But this electron beam also generates X-rays, and these characteristic X-rays can be measured using our technology, LAX technology. So we can instantaneously, as we deposit a film, measure its composition. So this, for example, is a film measured by LAX technique here as yttrium-1, barium 1.87, copper 3.13. And this is measured several weeks later using Rutherford backscattering, and the answer comes out to be very, very close to what we had here. Okay. So the second product, the magnetic microscope, is very interesting because what we do is when you send a current down any wire, the current generates, essentially a magnetic field. This is the Biot-Savart's law. And so essentially you can see if I take a magnetic detector that measures a normal component of the magnetic field and I scan it across like this here, and this detector here is a superconducting quantum interference device. And as we move it across, what happens is the field changes sign. So the field is down red here, and then over the wire, it becomes 0. And on the other side, the field goes up. So this is the principle behind magnetic field imaging, where you can send currents in anything in the magnetic field can be detected. The advantage is magnetic fields penetrate most material. Therefore, you can take a package chip and you can send currents in the chip and you can image the current through the package of the chip. Okay. So for example, here is a multi-chip module from Intel, and this is the magnetic field image. This is the Fourier transform of the magnetic field image, and it shows you how a current follows this very unusual path. You overlay it with a CAD drawing here, and you can actually follow exactly where the current is flowing with respect to the various metal lines. And in this particular package, the current should have gone along this line, but instead it suddenly meandered this way, and therefore there's a defect right here. So we can locate a fault this way. And the other interesting thing is if you look at the intensity of the lines, the metal lines that are further away with respect to the detector, they produce a weaker signal. The ones that are closer to the detector produce a strong signal. So this is the kind of information, depth-dependent information you can get from this stuff. This is, for example, a AMD K6 processor where some of the transistors are leaking, and you can see the leakage here. This is a complete current image of the whole thing, and the current essentially peaks where there's a leakage here. So this is how you can actually locate a defect on the chip. And this technology, now is gone down to sub-micron resolution using a magnetoresistive sensor in addition to the squid. So now we can actually get current images that are down in the 100 nanometer scale, basically. Now, the semiconductor industry basically told us that, look, it's so good to look at shorts, but we really want to look at opens. Can you see opens somehow? But you see, you can't send a DC current in an open. So we had to come up with a new technology. So current technology is what's called time domain reflectometry, where they send a pulse, and whenever the pulse reflects back from an open, it'll just come back. This is the reflected signal, and from the edge, one can actually determine where the open is. But the current spatial resolution of this TDR is ridiculously large. It's like 150 microns to a millimeter is the kind of distances that they can really measure. Something shorter than that is very difficult. So what we did with the magma was a completely cool idea. We just imaged the AC. We sent AC current in a wire, and you see what happens is an AC current. If there is an open here, the intensity of the AC current will linearly drop. So it won't unlike a DC, it won't completely go to zero. So it'll actually, you can have a finite current in a line, and the current will essentially reflect at where the open is, and therefore very close to the open, you have a linear approximation that it can work. So we call this technique standing domain reflectometry. And here, for example, is a meandering metal line, and the metal line is laser cut here to create an open. And these are current images that you see in the wires. And right at the point where you see the current is dying down, it's dying down. And then right about this point here is where the actual cut is. So we can actually locate an open by imaging high frequency current in these lines. So these are the kind of stuff. So this is the actual magma product that is sold to all over the world to the semiconductor companies, and they use this for failure analysis. So this, for example, is something like 10 to the 5 times 10 to the 5, what they call through silicon via Daisy chain, and you can see the current is actually going up, then down into the wafer, and then comes back up again, then goes back down again, etc. So, and these are magnetic field image patterns that we generated in this stuff, and these are actual current images at various levels: top, bottom, middle, etc. So this is the collaboration with the Fraunhofer Institute, and so these are the kind of ways we can use this magnetic microscope. So let me give you an idea of how the company got funded and how we built all these products, basically. So we initially I did an angel funding of about 7 million from 1998 to 2001. And then Intel got extremely excited. So they supported us in putting together a venture capital group consisting of Intel, FEI, and a bunch of venture capitalists from the Boston and Connecticut area. And the B round of about 30.5 million was invested in the company. Okay, then what happened? This is the time when the 9/11 struck, as you all know, and essentially the semiconductor business more or less evaporated. So we were in what I would call in the worst situation that you could be in, and the money was running out. And so by 2005, the CEO, all the big bosses in the company, they all left, and the I basically, as a founder, had to hold the bag, and the VCs basically said, "Hey, Venki, how long will it take you to shut the company down?" And at that point, I went to my CFO and I told the CFO, "Do you think, in order to shut the company down, do the following: you create a plan where we will not get any of our receivables, anything that product that we have sold, we will not collect any of the money, and then we have to pay up all the people that we owe money to. We have to pay them up. Okay, can you come up with a financial plan in terms of what it will look like?" So the CFO came back and said, "Well, we are about 1.5 to $2 million short, even to close the company down within, say, 2 weeks." Okay, so I went back to the board and I told the guys, "Listen, guys, cough up $2 million so that we can all avoid going to the jail or going to get sued by somebody." And at that time, they all looked at me and say, "Well, you have an alternative plan?" And I told them, "Yes, I have an alternative plan. I would like to recapitalize the company. You don't need to put any money. I'll give you guys 60% and I'll keep 40%. And with my ownership, with my percentage, I will raise money to run the company forward." So we essentially reformulated the whole company, and today the company is profitable, and it's effectively 30 years old since the inception, though it's a different company as of 2006, basically. Okay, so in Singapore, I've been doing a number of interesting work where, for example, we measure the molecular content of breath, and we find that there's a correlation between the molecular pattern in the breath and diseases. Here, for example, using the technique in a mass spectrometer, we are able to separate out lung cancer patient, tuberculosis people from normal people. Okay, so we formed a company now called Breathonics based on this technology, and similarly, this similar concept can be applied to development of novel catalysts and also for diagnostics of food. But more interestingly, what we found is that we can actually make a variety of oxide surfaces on which cell growth can be controlled. So for example, these are very special oxide surfaces on which you can see stem cells can be grown with 200% efficiency. This is our surface. This is essentially standard laboratory surface. So this has tremendous implication for a variety of biological applications, such as artificial skin growth, stem cell therapy, and so on. So we formed another company called Cellivate, basically, to commercialize this technology. So these are basically a number of I've written down about 12 ideas where we could start companies, and essentially this company started with my student Zunan and her husband, and this is Cellivate started with my postdoc, and we are now in the process of starting a company called Cleome Photonics, and there's another company we've just started called Azometrics, which is a company based on a highly efficient molecular system. Okay, so there's a lot of these are all university-born ideas, but they're all commercializable, which I think of as very exciting frontiers. Okay, so now I want to talk about academic entrepreneurs and matters relating to all of you guys and you people. And so first, I'd like to ask this question now. So I'd like to take a poll on this. So could you answer this?
Okay, we're launching another poll. And again, about 20 seconds. Okay. Wow. Okay. Wow. We got a lot of responses. Very consistent responses. So I'm gonna close this poll. It's not changing a lot. So I'm gonna close the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And sharing the results. 100% said entrepreneurs are made, not born.
Fabulous. Wonderful.
You're making a good impression, Venki.
Well, I think I'm talking to the right audience. That's for sure. Okay. So I just want to give you a picture of the variety of people that worked with me and who all became entrepreneurs. And so if I introduced you to any one of them, you would never guess in a million years that one day these guys will become aggressive entrepreneurs, heading up the company of their own and so on. And essentially, I think a lot of it is simply because of the fact that I was an entrepreneur and a professor, and it kind of rubbed off on most of these people, basically. So that that was definitely an important aspect of the whole thing. So many of them have done outstandingly well in their life. They're incredibly rich, and as my wife always kids me, she says you're like Oliver Goldsmith, the old school master, that sort of thing. And but I take a great deal of pride in their accomplishment. That's for sure. Yeah. So the there's an actual list of the people here that all, even though in my introduction we talked about 10 people, that actually realized that there was more number of people in this list than I could realize. And this is roughly about 20% of the people that worked under me, and 20% of the people became entrepreneurs. I mean, to me, this represents an enormous number of people who could potentially become entrepreneurs. If I look at the entire, let's say, the scientific community, physics and engineering community, and looking at all the, say, graduate students, there probably a much smaller fraction really become entrepreneurs compared to a list like this. And I think I have a great deal of hope that in the future we'll see more entrepreneurs emerging out of the scientific community. Okay, so now the question is, how does one build companies like Google or Facebook and all this sort of stuff? There's this guy named Peter Thiel. He's got a book called 0 to 1, and he always talks about betting on contrarian truth. I mean, he said, okay, what important truth do very few people agree with you on? I mean, but at the same time, if you're really convinced that this is something that would really, be effective and going to create a product that would be of great value, then, this would be what I call contrarian truth. And if you're convinced of that, and your conviction is based on actual, what I call logical thinking, and is essentially supported by at least a few experts, then this would be a very good way to start a company, and this will enable you to avoid competition, and it'll make sure that the technology is at the right time. Okay, and the second thing you want to do, you want to identify a small niche market, and you want your business to get a major part of that small market. So it's very important to become a dominant player even in a small market. So, and then once you become dominant in this, then essentially you can expand much more and move to a larger fraction of the market. And so the key part is to try to be a monopoly, so that everything, all of this stuff, basically when people think of a particular product, they think of you, more or less. So these are kind of like a tip for building what I call the likes of eBay, Yelp, etc. Right? But now, the point of this, for an academic professional like us, I mean, what do we do? So here are several things that are possible. Suppose you want to maintain your academic job, and then you want to start a company, right? Then what can you do? Okay, now in my case, for example, I was the founder of my company. I was a full-time professor. I was also, University of Maryland allowed me to be a CEO of my own company, which was very liberal. And this was very unusual, actually. Nowadays, I think that is becoming harder and harder. But I maintain a full equity stake, high equity stake in the company. My responsibility with the company is also high, and my time commitment for the company is high in this model. An alternative would be, you could be the founder and the chairman. So one of your graduate student or a postdoc or somebody, you runs the company full time, and you can still get a high equity stake. This is exactly similar to what Amnon Yarif did in his companies. He took equity stake, but he never took responsibility for running the company or did not give the time commitment. Okay, so the commitments are medium, but his stake was very high. Okay. Similarly, you could be foundry advisory board member, in which case you have high equity, medium responsibility, and low time commitment. And lastly, you could be just the advisory board member, in which case your equity state will be medium to low, and similarly responsible and time committed low. So these are like 4 different scenarios that an academic person can in working with a startup company that arises out of a technology developed in their own group or their colleagues group or whatever. So these are possibilities. But one of the big issues, and if you maintain an academic footing and also start your own company, is you have to manage the conflict of interest. Okay, this is a very big and serious issue because there'll be very often times when you will have to really balance your interest in the university and the interests of your company. And I strongly advise people to have a conflict of interest committee consisting of department chair, dean, assistant to president, some senior members on the campus to form an COI committee to whom you report to, and you present to them basically, in a very transparent way, how issues relating to your company and the universities keep coming up, and you bring it to the notice, record the meeting, and what the reaction, how they ask you to do, and so on. Okay, so this keeps the transparency, and you will actually find that the COI committee will be far more generous in the way they deal with situation. In my particular case, I took a much more stricter view of the law, and I would be very, very careful in terms of what I can do with my company and what I can do with my university. But I found that COI committee was far more liberal than I was, basically, which is surprising to me. But I did this for like a couple of years, kept these meeting notes and so on. And after some time, the problems were just more or less repeating, and the solutions were already discussed. So the need for the meeting became less and less, and eventually I didn't have this committee anymore. Basically, there wasn't a need for it. Okay, for all aspiring entrepreneurs. Okay, here's another question. Okay, what do you think? Here's another one for a poll. Let me know.
Okay.
Which you think is, yeah.
Go ahead.
Which is riskier over a lifetime in terms of financial reward?
Okay, launching a poll. So we'll give about maybe 20 seconds for everybody to answer the question. They're having to think about this one. Okay. All right, so I think we're going to close the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the results, interesting. 80-20 split, whether it's riskier being an entrepreneur or a lifelong academic.
So A is 80 and B is 20?
20 was being an academic and being an entrepreneur was 80.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man, this is the right group. All I can say. Fantastic. Okay, good. So, all right. So the first question is, when you want to start a company as an entrepreneur, these are the various sources of funds, right? Personal fund, SBIR fund, broad agency announcement grants, angel funds, commercial contract funds, and venture capital money. Okay, these are the thing. And as you can see, I put the VC money at the very end because that requires a separate discussion in of itself. Okay, I mean today SBIR funds are every funding agency under the government, right? Department of Commerce, Department of Transportation, DOD, you name it. They all have to dedicate somewhere between 1 to 3% of their total outlay for SBIR grants. Okay, so the SBIR, there's a lot of SBIR funds available for starting companies. Now, NSF is very special. NSF has SBIR funds, and these don't have any specific ideas associated with them. If you go to an SBIR fund from DoD, the DoD will give you a problem. They will describe a problem that they have, and you have to find a solution for them through your company. Okay. Whereas SBIR funds from NSF do not define any problem. So you can go to them with an idea that you have, which will produce a commercial product, and you can go for an NSF grant, even if there's no matching solicitation. There's no need for that for NSF SBIR grant. So in that sense, the NSF is very special. Okay, and now what are let's say you formed a company and you formed the company and you want to make some money out of your company, and how do you do that? Okay, let's see. So this is something worth thinking about. So you can form a company, you have small payouts, that is, money comes from your company, you have a fixed consultancy, you can have a variable consultancy depending on the external funding level. For example, you could play an increasing role in your company. I'm talking about people who already have an academic job. Okay, so essentially you can have either fixed consultancy or a variable consultancy depending upon whether your company got an SBIR grant or a BAA grant or whatever. Okay, so you can adjust this accordingly. You can have medium scale payout. This is what I mean is truly bigger money. I'm talking big chunk, not 20,000, 50,000, but like $500,000, that type of money. Okay, so medium scale payout comes when you go to venture capital funding. People always say when you go to a VC funding that you won't be able to take any money out of the company at the time of VC funding. The truth of the matter is, it all really depends on how much the VC wants to fund your company. If they're really, really eager to put money into your company, in that situation, you can actually negotiate some upfront money so you can sell some of your shares, the founder shares, to the VCs separately, and you can take that money out. Of course, they won't let you take a very large chunk. They want you to keep a major portion of your ownership with the company, but they would allow you to take a certain fraction, which will give you a reasonable amount of money to put down on, let's say, a home or something like that. Okay, so this is possible. The real large-scale payout from forming a company, comes from when an IPO or someone comes and buys your company for a reasonably good money compared to the actual valuation of the company. Okay, so the last part is monetizing the startup through venture capitalists. Okay, I would rather go to an angel capital because they're a lot easier to deal with compared to venture capital. This is the most challenging aspect of startup companies when you go to a VC. Okay, why? Because what I've seen historically is many academic entrepreneurs who started venture capital companies have ended up with little or nothing despite generous VC funding over several rounds. I know of people who are serial entrepreneurs who have gone through like half a dozen companies but have not made any money at all at the end. And this is because the entrepreneurs are easy victims of the dilution and liquidation process. There are two processes called dilution, the other is called liquidation. And both these processes, the people who get screwed are the entrepreneurs. And so why is that? So one of the key reasons why entrepreneurs rarely cash out is the venture capitalists get preferred stocks. The founders have what are called common stocks. So second point is the VCs add dividend or interest payments to your term sheet. So every year they charge an 8 or 12% per annum interest, and this chips away at your ownership. So the longer your company is with the VC, the less you will own at the end. Okay, so you're constantly getting diluted. Time is your biggest enemy. So when do you really go to a VC? You really should go to a VC when you know that with that injection of money from the VC, your product is ready to hit the market. There is a market for it. And so you have a business plan that you genuinely believe in. You know what I mean? Many of us write business plans. We put various numbers in order to get the money from the VC. And you really ask the question in the deep depth of your heart, can you really make these numbers meet? And the answer very often like, well, you're taking the best shot here, that sort of thing. And not everybody really believes that they're going to meet that number. And the bottom line is, when you go to a VC, you yourself must genuinely believe in your ability to deliver on your business plan. Because if you don't deliver on your business plan, your ownership in the company will be hurt. The VC money will effectively be wasted, basically. Okay, so these are the two things: these non-dilution clause and the liquidation preferences, which are two things that work in essentially the favor of the venture capitalist. I'm going to give you an example of this liquidation preference, what it means, for example. So let's say, let us say you're an entrepreneur at t equal to 0, you had 100% value of the company, and your company was valued at $10 million. Okay. Now, then the VCs will come and say, hey, you own 10 million of the company, but look, we're going to invest in your company, after a VC round and all this sort of stuff, you're going to own a smaller portion of a larger pie. And so you would come out ahead anyway. Okay, this is the kind of story that you normally hear. Okay. So now, let's say the investor is willing to put $10 million in your company. You're valued at at a value of 10 million. Okay, so the VC ownership is equal to the $10 million investment divided by $10 million valuation plus the investment. So essentially, your company is now $20 million in the denominator because your company is worth 10 million. That's the valuation, and actual money has come in, which is 10 million. So the total value of your company now is 20 million. So the VC will get essentially the investment amount divided by the total value of the company. So after the VC round, the entrepreneurs own 50% of the stock. But after 4 years, due to interest payments, your entrepreneur's stake will drop down to 25%. Now, let's say a liquidation event take place, that someone wants to buy a company, and they will buy it for 3 times the valuation of a funding round at $30 million. Okay. So the company sells for $30 million. So you say, oh, wow, I'm going to really make it big. The investors got something called liquidation preference. So what they do is 2 times the investment goes straight to the investors out of this $30 million. And only the last X gets shared. So your share comes out to be 0.25 times 10 million, which is about 2.5 million. Imagine you started with a company which was valued at $10 million. You owned 100% of it. And then after 4 years of working hard and going through all the heartache and getting the company's value to $30 million and getting it sold, you come up with $2.5 million, right? I mean, this is absurd, right? Because at t equal to 0, you could have sold your company for maybe $5 million or $6 million to somebody, and walked away with more money than you'd have made after going through all the fundraising process and 4 years of hard work. And what are you getting, right? So this is something most entrepreneurs don't think about. They have actual value in a startup that is producing profit, that is producing things. That company actually has a market value. And you may want to think very seriously about, selling the company rather than going to a VC, raising it and trying to make it into something very big. Okay. So dealing with venture capitalists, here are my points. Okay. So before you go to a VC, look seriously at exit options. We have demonstrated value, as you may come out far ahead. In negotiating with VC, they're like PhDs and you're like a kindergarten. So you got to get someone to help in the negotiation process. And valuation is not the only item to look after. The VC term sheet has a large number of terms in them that favor them. Okay. So there's a whole bunch of things here, but given the time limit right now, I'm going to skip all of this stuff. But so I would sort of say my conservative monetizing pathway: start tech company with the help of federal funds, SBR. These are all free money. Okay. Move the idea from proof of principle to validation stage with commercial prototypes. Create a decent revenue generating business. Liquidate the company by selling to a strategic buyer. For this, you form a relationship with a strategic company who wants your product, that you think will eventually buy your product, and focus on, essentially, your focus of your company to create value for a strategic buyer. So this is a very different approach. in terms of how you want to exit. So this is something called exit strategy. It's very important to get your head, screwed up about the exit strategy right from the very beginning. How are you going to exit the business one day? You know, because if you think you're going to build $100 million, billion business, what will happen is at different growth stages, different skill sets are required, and you have to bring in different key persons for the different growth stages. So you can't just be the same person at the helm of the company through the entire growth of the company. It's very, very difficult. And therefore, having a clear exit strategy is very important for you. Okay. Now, I'm going to skip this question, but so at this stage, how are we doing in terms of time?
So Vinky, we're running up against the end of our time,
Okay,
and
so
we
should
have a lot.
I can stop. I can stop right now because this the most of the point that I had now for academic institutions, how to build an entrepreneurship program. But I think most of the message that I wanted to give the entrepreneurs is over. So this is a good time for question answer, I would think.
Yeah, we actually have a number of really good questions that have been coming in.
Yeah.
So I want to
Okay.
make
So
sure that we have a little bit of time to talk about some of those, and we
okay.
may be able to actually hang out a little bit past the hour for some additional discussion if people want to hang around. But let me ask a couple of
Yeah.
questions at first. So one question that came in is, in all of this, I think many students think when physicists are confronted with these kinds of ideas, they think business school. So one of our questions was how valuable or worth, like what kind of a return on investment would be getting, for an example, an MBA if you wanted to start the kinds of companies that you've launched.
Okay. The the really good way to think about this is right. You know, let's say the reason you want to form a company is because you have some great idea, a technology idea, whatever it is, right? Now, the point is, if at this time you want to start the company, right? What's the point of trying to get some education at this stage of the game, right? So what you want is you want a partner, okay? So you will form a team with one or two people who have the skills that you're looking for, right? And so you create a team, a management team, which is going to take this entrepreneurship company forward. So you will seek out one or two partners among your friends that you believe in, people that you trust, and who have complementary skills. That is what I would call action plan number one. Now, if you're thinking of becoming an entrepreneur, not today, but you want to start a company, let's say 2-3 years from now, and you want to go to management school and you want to get training, my point is majority of the management schools are not teaching students to be entrepreneurs. They're really training, the management schools are training people to be managers in major corporations, basically. And so, for example, a lot of the courses in MBA to me are actually not necessary at all for you to become an entrepreneur. So I would say there is a lot one can learn one can learn quite a bit by reading up books on entrepreneurship, books on how to essentially keep your account and financial statements in a company and those kind of stuff. Really not necessary for an MBA at all. Okay, I mean generally I try to create a program in NUS in terms of, MBA involvement in businesses, and I found that uh, the MBA program is primarily training them for corporations.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That totally makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah, and right. So a related question. I mean, I can kind of combine a few questions into one.
sure.
Um, so we all know that in order to be successful as an entrepreneur, as scientists, we've got access to all kinds of cool technologies we're working with. Do you have any advice on how to actually kind of match, how to find that customer segment or the need or the problem that you're trying to solve with a technology that you might have? Or is that the process that you would recommend? Any pointers
Yeah,
there?
yeah. So this process is actually called, uh, technology marketing. Really, I mean, people confuse between marketing and sales. Okay, So let me explain the difference. Sales is a process where you're trying to convince a customer that, hey, listen, I got a solution for your problem, so buy it from me. Okay. Marketing is you are trying to figure out, is your technology, what is its value in the marketplace, and how does it compete with other solutions that exist, competing solutions, and where is your price point where your product becomes attractive to the customer over your competition. So these are the kind of issues, right? So this technology marketing is really what I would call the crux as well as the bane of most entrepreneurs. Most technology entrepreneurs don't respect the value of marketing, and so they start a company, they love the technology, they love the solution it provides, but they don't understand that this solution is way too expensive and no one is going to pay for it, or there are competing solutions that actually offer a lot more than what they're offering. So essentially, the question really, this is actually market research. So this is something as an entrepreneur you have to do. You have to do a market research. So what you do is you literally talk to your customers and literally talk to as many of them as possible, sound them out and say, hey, listen, is this problem that you're having, is there a serious problem? And what kind of money would you be willing to pay for a solution to this problem? And what level of expertise would you have to adopt my solution to solving this problem? And these are the kind of questions that an entrepreneur will have to do. That's called market research, and you have to do that.
Right.
And that would be prerequisite to raising any kind of funding for your company.
Right. Right. Absolutely. So, okay, I think we're gonna do one more question, and then for those who want to sign off, just I'll make a couple of reminders, and if people want to stick around for a couple more questions and discussion, I think that would be great because there's a lot of really great questions coming in right now. So,
Okay.
one last question for now. What was your scariest moment in all of this? I mean, this is a lot of risk involved in entrepreneurship. So, what would you characterize
Yeah.
as your scariest moment, and what did you do?
Yeah. Well, actually, to be very honest with you, the number of scary moments are so many. So it's not one particular moment. The when my in 2005, when essentially one of the deal when the venture capitalists came in was they said that, Venki, you are a technical person. We can't have you as a CEO. We're going to hire industry-based CEO. Do you have any problem? I said, absolutely not. My goal is to give the company to some people who have the ability to lead me to great riches. So I don't mind. So that was my position. And unfortunately, the combination of the timing, the semiconductor market tanking right after 9/11, and the fact that we brought in a team of managers from the major corporations, we hired them through extremely expensive process through the recruitment firms and so on. And their culture was so different from that of a small business culture. Like for me, I think of like, if I go to a city, I go to, Motel 6 or something, I'll go stay there to minimize the expense. But these guys would go and stay in Marriott or, Hilton, they're very different. So that's why we were running out of money very, very quickly. So when 2005 came and the company was really out of money, because we had such expensive management, uh, the VCs basically said you're going to walk, and they say they're talking about pulling the plug on the company. It meant nothing to them, literally. I mean, they're literally ready to walk out. And here, my entire life's effort is just coming to a screeching halt. And those are really nightmarish times for me. And so I contact various friends, started developing a strategy, and that's why the recapitalization idea came up, because I had a lot of good friends who gave me some very, very good advice, and based on which I was able to go rescue my company. Right now I'm going through another nightmare situation, which is the COVID-19. Right now, since January, I'm the president of my company, and I have left NUS completely, and I'm only a part-time position there. And right now, we're faced with the fact that as of February, this year was going to be a bang-up year for us, going to be a really big year for us. And as of February, we have lost all customers. We can't talk to any customers because every country is on shutdown. and we can't visit anyone. We have several products sitting on our dock to be shipped out. We can't even get freight forwarders who will take our product to different countries right now. Is that bad? And we can't send someone to install these to collect the money. So this is, talk about a nightmare situation. This is probably another big nightmare situation.
Mhm.
So the solution for us is to go to one of these loans, federal loans and so on. So working really hard in trying to procure that right now. Okay, but when you have a small business, running a small business, lots of Pepto-Bismol moments. Believe me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely,
Um,
yeah.
okay, so this is all the time we have for the official webinar, but like I said, there are a few more questions that I think are very good ones. So if anybody has time to stick around, but I do want to make a couple of very quick important announcements before people sign off. If you do have to sign off and we still haven't gotten to your question, you can certainly send an email to webinars@aps.org. We can forward it on for comment. As we said, a recording of this video will be made available on the APS Careers YouTube channel, but you will also receive an email with a link to this recording. And also, we'll have a link to the survey in that email that goes out. Please take a moment to just fill that out and give us some feedback. Okay, and we hope you'll join us again next time. So for those who are still on the call, there's a couple of additional questions. One of them is that we didn't talk much on the significance of having skills in intellectual property disclosure. Can you talk about the need for skills with patenting ideas?
Yes, I think, I mean, IP is very critical because how do you protect your IP is a very, very important piece of the whole puzzle, because without the IP, you won't have anyone talking to you. I mean, particularly anybody with money want to invest in a company, the first question they will ask is, do you have your technology protected? So learning about IP is very, very important. And generally, most universities have the industry liaisons office, or they have an entrepreneurship office in the ILO, and they generally will offer courses on how best to create IP and how to protect it, etc. So there'll be, generally the universities offer these programs and you can learn from them. And I would say that keeping a very good lab notebook, and your lab notebook is actually your biggest legal protection. So in the lab notebook, what you do is, whenever you have a great idea, you write down the idea there in as much detail as possible, put the date on it, and then show it to one of a knowledgeable friend to read it and witness it. Okay, so you have another party witnessing your idea right there. So this is your basic, what I call basic level protection of your idea. Eventually, when you want to go for a patent, you need to really work with a good patent attorney. Because I always found that a very good patent attorney will force you to think of, how do you put in good claims in a patent, and that process is a very, very strong two-way process between the patent attorney and yourself. And so you work together to put together a very, very strong patent that covers as much ground as possible, but at the same time specific enough to block someone else from taking your technology.
Wow, that's really good advice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems like a really kind of low tech solution, but very smart.
Right.
Um, okay, another question. So if it was a fresh graduate, kind of fresh faced coming out of a PhD program, for example, I mean, you've given a lot of good advice. I mean, are there just kind of activities or things that you'd recommend that students participate that would help them evolve toward a career in entrepreneurship?
Well, yeah, actually, if you look at your own county or your township, right, they will always be what I call entrepreneur or company related affairs. They will have meetings and so on. For example, there is the Indus Ventures is an example. TIE Indus Ventures. They have programs all across the United States, in California, New York, Washington, all of this stuff. These are all what I call, people who are very interested in entrepreneurship, and they all have these little club-like things. And so they have events that take place where they will bring someone to give a specific talk on a specific topic that's of interest to entrepreneurs, and you go to these kind of meetings basically, and it helps you in many ways. Number one, you go to these meetings, you actually learn something from the speaker who will be talking about some topic, but more than that, it's a place where you network with others, okay? And over coffee, whatever it is, you're talking to other people and you're networking, and there are people looking to find others who are thinking in the same way and looking for partners and so on. So it is really a very important place. This is where your mind starts reshaping. When you go to these places like that, you begin to start thinking differently. Because it's a different crowd of people, and so this would really help a lot. I mean, that I find that is one of the easiest way to get the thing. And also, your university generally will offer the ILO or the industry liaisons office or the enterprise part of the university will be offering programs on what they call different workshops that they offer, and they will bring in entrepreneurs to give talks and so on. So be aware of these and sort of be looking out for them.
Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah, lots of places where there are resources that aren't like your advisor or your professor, or they have to look kind of sideways.
Yes.
Okay, so I have one more question. This is actually my own question. So you mentioned COVID, which is of course disrupting everyone's
Yes.
lives tremendously.
Right.
And I was curious. I didn't hear a lot about Celovix, but I want more generally. I was thinking, gee, if you're doing cool things with surfaces and with bio-relevant sort of applications, I mean, maybe there's a potential for like an antiviral coating that can be put down. But I'm curious if you can think about or advise on what you think are some opportunities for companies that might come up related to this crisis.
Do you mean the COVID crisis?
COVID,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, generally, right? I mean, whenever the world goes through a crisis of any kind, it represents a huge entrepreneurial opportunity, really. I mean, that is the difference between an entrepreneur and an average person. Okay, because there's a village where people are struggling because there's no bus service. The average person curses. They say, "Man, we didn't have time today." The entrepreneur, what he'll do is he'll create a bus service to
Right.
immediately take care of the problem. So the entrepreneurs see every problem as an opportunity, right? So
Mm,
so they look at things in a very different way. So, for example, I'm pretty sure. I mean, the absence of things like hand lotions and
mm,
masks and all this sort of stuff would lead people to start thinking about doing their own way. I'm sure there are many entrepreneurs who have already made something and made quite a bit of bucks out of this current situation.
hmm.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and I think the more interesting thing in the long see, for example, right, we have put in a research proposal already in Singapore for funding and using this molecular pattern recognition, breath pattern recognition, the way to see can we really look at diagnose COVID early enough, right?
Mm,
And essentially, someone comes in, goes to our machine, blows into it, right? And that's it. Within 2 minutes, we get the results. Do you
mm,
have COVID or you don't have COVID? Number
mhm,
two, we are also looking for what happens in COVID is after 1 week, there are two classes of people develop. One, people whose health improves after 1 week. Then there's another one in which the health deteriorates rapidly in 1 week. So this
mhm,
is the pattern of patients. So is that a way we can actually figure out ahead of time which category this person is going to be in? Going to be in the
mhm.
dangerous category or the one that's going to recover?
Mhm.
Because we can get this person be prepared for a ventilator ahead of time. You know what I'm saying?
Right, right,
So
absolutely.
we put in a proposal. We are waiting right now for some kind of a result on this from the granting agency. So
Yeah,
it's an example of that. So there are a lot of opportunities here, I would say.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, Venki. Well, I think that's all we're gonna do today. But thank you again so much. This has been a great presentation. Again, those who are, you'll get a recording in the as an email, and also we'd love you to fill out that survey when you get it. Thanks a lot, and we'll
Okay.
see you again next time.
Okay.
American Physical Society, copyright 2020, all rights reserved. Bye-bye.
Bye.